Okay, well, welcome to the second in the AnamSound series of introductory talks about topics and subjects that some people deem to be spiritual. And the aim of these insightful gatherings is to encourage and promote discussion and debate and the greater awareness of the current subject. In this case, it is about Saturn and Karma. Saturn has been much maligned in astrology as a malefic or a harbinger of doom or a restrictive, depressive kind of astrological influence on the human psyche. It tends to generate a lot of fear when whispers of the dreaded Saturn return are mentioned. And anyway, its all-round kind of astrological reputation is quite negative. A well-renowned author, astrologer, and Jungian psychologist called Liz Green, who is the co-founder of the College of Psychological Astrology, the CPA. She wrote a book in 1976, published by Visa Publishing House, and it was kind of the mid-80s into the 90s that it came to the fore, and she kind of championed Saturn's corner. She kind of said, well, Saturn's not a depressive, negative, fearful, stressful, restrictive influence on people. It's actually a really positive, courageous way for you to actually understand and deal with the notion and concept of limitation, obligation, responsibility. And the book was called Saturn, A New Way at Looking at an Old Devil. And it's a very detailed, definitive analysis of Saturn from a Jungian psychological, astrological perspective. And she, Liz Green, is considered, along with a man called Howard Sasportas, who is the co-founder of the CPA, as a really respected authority on the planet of Saturn in a psycho-astrological way explanation. It's also, this book's now actually a classic. When people talk about Saturn, who know anything about astrology, they immediately think of Liz Green, and they immediately think of this, because this was the landmark book on Saturn. This helped change a centuries-old idea of Saturn being, really bad, negative. When Saturn's in transit, it's really terrible, bad things happen. And it was a nice, positive way in the late 80s, the time when we had the big bubble and the bust and the boom, the materialism. It was a nice kind of antidote to that, because when you read it, you began to understand that limitation and perseverance and obligation and responsibility are actually quite positive things and help us to become mature people. They actually help us to become wiser and maturer and obviously much more useful in society as a societal member. And it is the classic psychological, astrological explanation of Saturn, and it really is balanced. She did a lot of research. It took, I think, 14 or 15 years of research before she even thought of reading the book. So I suggest that if you're interested in Saturn, I've looked on Amazon, because I couldn't find an ISBN number, because it is quite an old book, it's nearly 40 years old. So it's still available on Amazon. So if you look on there and you're interested, as I said, it's called Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil, and later on I will give you out notes. I'll actually email you notes for your information if you're interested. So, karma and Saturn, when people speak to me about karma, I tend to think of Saturn, because in astrology, karma is linked to Saturn. Karma in the Western tradition, the Western intellectual and spiritual tradition, has become part of a common parlance for those who lean towards spiritual exploration. So its meaning to me has become somewhat kind of diluted, and like Saturn, karma has a kind of ambivalent reception in Western society. So we're going to have a brief description of the idea of karma, and I'm going to take the very simple Buddhist idea of cause and effect, action and inaction, and how it changes and how it impacts on our lives. And that will allow you guys to actually start to open up and think of a really profound subject in a broader way, because we all have our own concepts of what karma is, yeah? But I'm just going to take one simple idea, notion of karma, and then open it so that you can debate it. And then we're going to also briefly look at the concept of people don't see the beauty and wisdom of structure and discipline and maturity. And actually that if we want to live on this finite earth, we do need a set of a set of boxes or parameters that we can actually all live by. Because if we want to remain in a society and civilized, in other words, we don't eat each other or just kill each other or bite each other or roast each other, then we do need some kind of rules and regulations that we all follow so that everybody can live peaceably. And my concept of structure is about the beauty and wisdom of structure. So the lovely side of structure, the nice side of self-discipline, the positive side of being maturity and of, you know, restraint, as opposed to just doing what you like. Because sometimes we need to, but if we, as I said, if there are billions of us on this planet, and if we all just did as we liked, nothing would get done and everybody would be eaten. It's as simple as that. So we do need those parameters. Obviously, it can go to an extreme, but I'm talking about the positive side of it. And the last kind of thing is our personal ideas of what responsibility, obligation, and perseverance are about. You know, how we perceive responsibility, obligation, and perseverance, and how it fits into our lives, and how Saturn, as an energetic, or as an energy, allows us to actually deal with these themes in our lives. And my greatest hope is that this initial talk ignites your curiosity to discover more about this. I term it as an unpolished diamond. Anybody got any questions? Okay.
Comment.
No, leave comments to the end, because obviously we have to get through this. So what I've done is I've tried to make this quite simplistic. So I've broken it up into like 4 sections. So first of all, I'm going to give you a mythological significance of Saturn. Then I'm going to give you an astronomical significance of Saturn. Then I'm going to give you an astrological significance of Saturn, all this cool business going on. And then I'm going to kind of talk about Saturn as an energy, energetically, how it fits into our lives. Because at the moment, Saturn is just a word to you, do you know what I mean? You may know it's a planet astronomically. You may know that in astrology it rules Capricorn. But at the moment, Saturn is just a word to you. So hopefully through this very brief introduction to Saturn, you'll be able to build a jigsaw from looking at it from different basic perspectives as to what Saturn is, how it impacts your life, how you can use that energy in a positive way as opposed to a negative way. So the traditional 500-600 year argument is that, as I said, Saturn is a malefic. It's, you know, it's a bad energy. Nothing good can come of it. That's not actually true, because each of us has to deal with Saturn from the day we're born until the day we die. And not every time that we deal with Saturn it's necessarily negative. And from the negativity actually comes positivity, because ultimately Saturn is a mentor teacher energy. But we will get back to that. So we'll start first with the mythological. In Greek mythology, Saturn signified the following. Saturn was Cronus, who was one of the Titans, who were a set of immortals or gods that ruled the earth, ruled the world. Okay? So Cronus was only one of the Titans. There were supposedly hundreds, but there were 12 Titans that were known. And Cronus was the father of Zeus, who, because the Romans took their mythology from the Greeks, they just altered some of the names. So Zeus you would know as Jupiter, okay? And Cronus you would know as Saturn, okay? And he was very much into he was king of the gods, and there was no way he was giving up his throne for anybody, because he believed that his way was the right way. And because he was an immortal, it wasn't like now when we abdicate or people die, he could just carry on being king of the gods. And he had a lot of fear of being usurped, of being removed as king of the gods. So what he used to do was, he had all these kids with his wife Rhea, and he used to eat them, he used to swallow them, so that they could not try, they couldn't sort of try and take over. And after a while, Rhea, his wife, she got kind of fed up of it. She's producing all these kids and they're being swallowed. No. So what she did was, when Zeus, Jupiter, was born, she tricked Cronus into swallowing a stone. He thought it was the baby, he swallowed a stone, so that the baby Zeus or Jupiter wouldn't be destroyed. So when the baby wasn't destroyed, she took him and she hid him off Mount Olympus. She took him away and made him mortal, gave him a body, so that that way Cronus or Saturn wouldn't know who he was or where he was, because he thought he'd swallowed him. Because when Zeus got, obviously he was a baby and he had a body and he grew up, when he grew up he went back into, because he was a kind of semi-mortal, he went back into being an immortal, and he eventually overthrew his father, and he replaced him as king of the gods, and he ruled on Mount Olympus. And that's where the whole sense of this Jupiter Zeus thing comes from. Obviously it's mythology, but there are obviously ideas in there of control and power and father, and not being able to relinquish your father or your authoritarian rights. Yeah, obviously mythology is just another way of trying to explain, I suppose, what we call psychology now. So basically, that's the mythological significance of Saturn. So Saturn is an authoritarian, is in control, will not relinquish control, will expect utter and open obedience, and will certainly not brook any kind of rebellion. But as Cronus the Titan was tricked by his own wife, the argument is that people, because we're half male and half female, can be tricked by the feminine side of them. So once the feminine side comes out, it softens this idea of control and being obedient and being king of the castle, captain of industry, and because Cancer and Capricorn in astrology are opposite. Cancer represents the mother and Saturn represents the father. So Cancer represented Rhea, who is his wife, who got him to swallow the stone. So the Cancerian thing of motherhood, nurturing, protecting, taking care of, this is the kind of mythology of it, because Cancer is the opposite sign to Capricorn. It's supposed to be complementary. So Cancer is about authority, is about ruling, but through the home, through the domesticity, through the nurturing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? Any questions quickly? Any simple questions?
No.
Okay, that's good. So that's the mythological significance of Saturn. Now I'm going to go on to the astronomical significance, because I think it's quite important to make this a material thing for you, to make you understand that there is a physical Saturn in the sky and you can physically see it. Do you know what I mean? Because Saturn, again, is at the moment is still only a myth to you. I've given you a very brief thing about the myth of Saturn, but now we're going to get into we're going to become Saturnian and get into the physical properties of Saturn. Saturn is the 6th planet away from the Sun in this cosmos, in this galaxy between Jupiter and Uranus. That's where it sits. So there's Jupiter, Saturn, then Uranus. It's the 2nd largest planet in the solar system and is 74,600 miles or 120,000 km in diameter. So it's pretty big. It takes 29.5 years to orbit the Sun and has a thick nitrogen atmosphere. It's got 18 major moons, the largest being Titan, which is quite interesting, isn't it? Because Cronus was Titan, and that moon is the same size as the planet Mercury. They say that there's got 18 major moons, but the amount of moons alter as more moons are discovered all the time. And the last count was a few years ago was about 70.
Yeah.
But all these moons are actually probably only a mile wide, so they're not really considered to be moons. Do you see what I mean? So that's why there are so many of them. But the major, the big size moons are approximately 18, as we understand it. The magnetic field is 1,000 times stronger than the Earth, and the Earth could be put 760 times into that planet. Saturn is encircled by rings. When you look at it, you see these rings, but they are actually particles of ice and rock. And there's a kind of alternative jet stream of east-west, west-east movement that makes those particles look like a ring. So they're going, so as I said, they're moving kind of east-west and west-east, and that's what gives us the perception that they're actually rings when they're not. In the last 20 or so years, quite a few journeys were made to Saturn by the Voyager and Cassini probes. I don't know if anyone knows about those.
Yeah.
But every so often it comes in the news.
Yeah.
And these journeys have given us a greater astronomical understanding of Saturn's rings and surfaces because they've been able to travel quite near to the Sun. But we still don't really have an exact explanation of the planet's surface. So although they've had these probes go there, we still don't have an exact explanation, and I think this will come in later. I think this is quite indicative of Saturn itself. There's this perceived concept of Saturn being X, Y, and Z, but it actually isn't. When you actually look at it, it's actually something else. And I think that's quite interesting that astronomically it's the same. They don't actually have a precise explanation of the surface of the planet yet.
Yeah.
So, we've done mythological and we've done astronomical. So we've got the myth, the old story from long ago, from over 3,000–4,000 years ago, and we've actually got the scientific, what they say is there according to what they found. Yeah, that's two bits, two portions of Saturn. Now we're going to go into the astrological significance of Saturn, which is probably the energetic, which is probably the most important to you people to help you to understand Saturn. Saturn's glyph, or the sign, is like an H with a cross through it. It's associated with restriction and limitation in astrology, and it is actually the antithesis of Jupiter, which expands, highlights, and emphasizes. Saturn's nature is to constrict, to contract, and to reduce. This planet may be perceived as dull or serious or depressing, but actually Saturn gifts us with structure, order, and measured time, space, and matter. In music, composition is ruled by Saturn, although music itself is traditionally ruled by Venus through Taurus's association. So it's interesting that measured composition, which is measured music, which is very ordered, precise, logical music, is ruled by Saturn, but music itself is ruled by Venus. Saturn reminds us of our limitations, of the boundaries, the responsibilities and commitments that we make or don't make in our lives. It brings definition to our lives and also highlights the need for self-control and the understanding of the finiteness of existence on the earth. So in other words, Saturn actually is trying to remind us that this is limited, and it's limited for a very good reason. It isn't limited because Saturn thinks that we're bad people or negative people or foolish people. It's limited because that's the way we have to experience life on this earth. Experience of life on this earth is finite. It's not forever. As we know, we're born and we live and we die. That's very Saturnine. The fact that we're born, we live and we die. And there's a measurement, 70 years and 10 or 70 years according to the biblical reference. So even that is actually measured out. It's not just willy-nilly, well, I might do 1,500 years or 200 years. No, this is normally what the human being will do. Roughly 60, 70 years. Some people go over, but that's the major portion of your life is 0 to 70. Yeah? Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn. And pre-Uranus's discovery in 1781, co-ruled Aquarius. And even now, there are Aquarians born in January who are very Capricorn-like, very Saturn-like. But the ones born in February tend to be more Uranian. Yeah, more to do with Uranus. So one tends to be very traditional, very orthodox, very measured, very controlled, whereas the February ones tend to be a bit more kooky, a bit more out there, because they've gone beyond Saturn, gone beyond the physical. So they're working with energies which are beyond the earth, beyond what is expressed and known here. Saturn is also known as the ringed planet because, as I said, of those particles of dust that move in the east-west-west direction. And it's associated with the fathers, the father, your individual father, fathers as a collective, parents, both mother and father, teachers, discipline, people in authorities like, judges, policemen, lawyers, doctors, conditional love, and rules and regulations. It's also associated with irrational personal fears, limitations, and a sense of responsibility and obligation. You're going to hear that word a lot, obligation, before this 2 hours is over. And in our lives, a Saturn transit serves as our greatest mentor teacher. And any astrological aspects, easy or difficult, or in aspects with other planets in the birth chart, indicate issues, challenges with the father energy within ourselves, and our notions of authority. And that's going to be quite key later on as well, yeah? So I'll say that again. Saturn transit serves as our greatest mentor teacher, and any astrological aspects, in aspects, easy or difficult aspects with other planets in the birth chart indicate issues, challenges with the father energy within ourselves, and or our notions of authority. Saturn in astrology is in its exaltation, so the most fortunate position in the sign of Libra. And Libra rules law, judgments, external partnerships, etc. And it's less fortunate in the signs Cancer, which is the opposite to Capricorn. So Capricorn and Saturn is father, Moon and Cancer is mother. They operate in different ways. They express their energies in very different ways. One is external, corporate, business, ambition, bureaucracy, and the other is, that's the Capricorn. The other one, Cancer, is domestic, within the home, nurturing, protecting, feeding, nourishing. So their energies are expressed in opposite ways. They're supposed to be complementary. So one stays at home, the Cancer, and the other one goes out, the Capricorn. So when Saturn's in the sign of Cancer, we call it the detriment, or it doesn't feel comfortable in that sign, because Capricorn's about going out there and making money and business and corporate and this, and whereas Cancer's saying, no, actually I want to reduce it to being a home, to being nurturing. So people born with Saturn in Cancer have a difficult time with the actual physical father, but also when they become fathers, have a difficult time fathering, because Saturn doesn't want to sit at home mucking about with kids. They want to be out there making the big buck. So when you've got Saturn in Cancer, you need to reconcile that energy. You need to bring the two energies. You are a nurturer, but maybe just a nurturer as a mentor in business. That's an ideal thing for Saturn to do. That's the way that Saturn would nourish, through mentoring, through teaching, through training. And when Saturn is in Aries, it's in its fall, because Aries is the sign opposite Libra. Libra is all about conciliation, diplomacy, working with other people, peace, balance. Whereas the Arian energy opposes that concept of fairness, law, balance and mercy. Instead, Aries will go for the me first option, pioneering, getting out there, not thinking too much about the details. Whereas Libra will think about the details and think hard and how it's going to affect everybody. In other words, Libra has got to look at action and inaction, cause and effect, how things are going to affect everybody in the situation. Whereas Aries will just go and do it. Oh well, that's too bad, I'm doing it. And Saturn is also our initial experience of authority as a child. Most of us, as children, obviously from the age of 2 onwards, we begin to exert our will. The will that we are, the energy that we are, we begin to form the ego as we become more conscious and aware. And what we tend to do is, we tend to just do what we like. When between 0 and 2, we just do what we like, because we have no concept of boundary and structure. The parents or the guardians, they're the ones that have got to use Saturn on our behalf. After about 2.5 years old, 3, when you start to go to kindergarten, when you start to go out into the world, things change. Suddenly there are social expectations of you which your family don't have, because they know who you are. So you run around, you jump in the puddles, you scribble on the wall, whatever you do, that's okay. Oh, well, that's part of the maturation process at home. But society is not so forgiving. Why is that child writing on the wall? Because the child doesn't know not to write on the wall, because the child writes on the wall in the home and we just clean it off. The Saturn influences, but that child's not civilized. That's a savage, because that child doesn't understand that you cannot go into the place and write on the wall. And that's the first time that children really understand Saturn. It's not even, because when they're small, between 0 and 2, we don't really chastise them, because then we know they are not aware, they're not conscious of what they're doing. Once they have to go outside and meet other people, this is where Saturn kicks in. Because now you have to say please and thank you. I want to go to the toilet, you can't just wet yourself there. Do you see what I mean? So this is Saturn coming into play. This is Saturn starting to impact energetically on the life of the individual. And most of us would have, once we became quite conscious, 3, 4, 5, adults start to tell us, no, you can't do that anymore. And we will, because we've had this will, no, I'm doing it, because we don't understand. We haven't got the boundaries yet. And it's through the people who are grown up have to act out our Saturn for us. Until we learn, by going out into the world, that actually this is how Saturn works. We all have the capacity, but we have to have the Saturn acted out for us until we are, obviously toilet trained, can sit still for a little while. So most of us would have had a problem when we were small with authority. We would have tried to flout it, we would have tried to fight back and rebel. And it's not because we're mean or wicked, it's simply because we have no concept of what limitation, responsibility, obligation is. So that's a natural response to something that we don't understand. It's only as we, as I said, go out into the social world, kindergarten, go to friend's house, party, whatever, where we know we can't spit at people anymore or take their cake. You see, we just have that, we realise that kind of behaviour kind of ignites a negative response, and we want to be accepted and loved. So that's how we learn. That's how Saturn first comes into our lives. Saturn is the karmic sign, or the sign that expresses the concept of action, inaction, or cause and effect. We will come back to that later, but I'm just giving you the basics now. It's the ruler of the 7th house in the astrological birth chart, and is the house of external relationships, law, judgment, heavy consequences for mistakes made, marriage, business partners, open enemies. And in the ancient tarot or tarot decks, Saturn was linked to major arcana cards, the Hermit, Judgment, and Justice. Any questions?
Nope.
The main key energy of Saturn is isolation. Now, what do I mean by isolation? Why would I be saying that Saturn is to do with isolation?
Is it because when Saturn exerts its influence on, as far as discipline is concerned, you tend to see yourself suddenly not so much as part of a group, but more as an individual that has certain responsibilities and obligations? That's right. That's one of the reasons. Saturn has to. What it is when you're small, you are part of a big tribe. There is no. It's like water just flowing. But what Saturn does is, the water has to go into a jug, and then be poured out. Before that, it's just water. It's just a stream of water. And then what Saturn does is, people get thirsty, so we take the jug, put it in the water, and pour it out, so each person's thirst can be slaked. Does that make sense? That's the Saturn energy of it. That's the Saturn. The isolation is there because it is a restrictive energy, but not in a negative way. Saturn forces us to go inward when we need to do work. When we need to do work on ourselves, what we do is, sometimes we run away. We go and do lots of external things just to be distracted. Saturn says, no, 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 I'm going to restrict you. It could be illness in a hospital, it could be a mental institute, it could be work, it could be a restrictive relationship like a marriage or an abusive relationship or whatever. The reason why you're in those relationships or in that situation is because you actually need to go inward. And the only way that Saturn can get you to go inward is to curtail your life in some way. Yeah? When we're running around, we can't actually do the work that we need to do that helps us to become more mature and wise. So what happens is the isolation is there so that you can deal with internal rather than external issues. And it reflects back to the Aryan energy of the 1st house, because the 1st house is opposite to the 7th house, which concentrates on what is seen on the surface, what's superficial, what people see as the facade or the persona or the mask. Saturn is anything but superficial,
and demands that we take care of business so that life can flow in an orderly, smooth, logical, proper way. Those words, orderly, smooth, logical, and proper, are very Saturnine words.
Question. Just can you repeat that section about the first house?
Okay, so the concept of Saturn being the key energy, this key energy being isolation, is that, as I said, it restricts you so that you can do internal work as opposed to external work.
Yeah, that's fine.
What happens is, Aries is the first house, and it's the opposite of Libra, the 7th house, that Saturn rules. Although it rules Capricorn, it's in its most fortunate position in Libra. So what happens is, the first house is about the ascendant or the facade or the persona that you project to the world. It can be quite superficial. You may not even be like that at all underneath, but that's what you project to the world. So that's the Aryan energy, which is superficial. It's not necessarily you. So because it's not you, you run around the place doing this and that because you don't want to really deal with the internal stuff that Saturn is asking you to deal with. So because you won't deal with it, Saturn restricts you. It starts to make your life smaller. So that, in other words, where I used to go 3 nights a week samba dancing, now because I broke my toe or my knee, I can't go at all. Because actually I need to stay home and clean my house or do something else. Do you see what I mean? So that's what it'll do. Something will happen, or I don't know, the class will close down. I can't go to samba anymore because the teacher's gone away. The reason being is I actually need to stay home and think and start pondering and actually take care of business, whereas I'm trying to distract you by running around the place. Now, does that make sense?
Yes.
People who are not used to being on their own for extended periods of time can get quite frightened and anxious when Saturn starts to appear in their life. Because, like I said, those people who are not used to being on their own, they're doing the Aryan first house, I'm going to run around and samba 3 times a week thing. What they should be doing is thinking, well, I'll still go once a week, but there's other 2 times a week. What I'll do is I'll start looking at things that need to really be dealt with and addressed. Yeah? And people who are afraid of being on their own, they kind of see Saturn as a kind of hard taskmaster who's trying to disturb their life and distress them and stop them from being who they really want to be. Actually, that's quite the opposite, but because of ego, that's what people start to think. With a slight change of perception and a little hindsight, it can be seen that, you know, Saturn is actually quite a benevolent energy. Even though its energy may seem quite cool and unfeeling, it's actually trying to help you through restriction to actually start understanding what's really real and what you're really about. That is the key of Saturn. Saturn isn't there to hurt anybody. It's saying, I'm giving you an opportunity to actually be real, look at what's actually going on in your life in a finite way, in a limited way, so that you can then deal with whatever it is and move on. And from that experience, you will become more mature and wiser.
Another question. In that process of looking at yourself in a finite way, as a result of that, does Saturn therefore enable you to look at stuff that you didn't notice before within yourself and bring that out and learn accordingly? So it enables you to actually go, obviously if you're restricted, you have to go inward a bit more. You have to look at, there's more detail there to look at.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, you may have known, for argument's sake, I may have known that I needed to get something fixed. But you know what? I don't want to do that. I don't want to polish the silver. I want to go sambering. So I'm going to go 3 times a week. Yeah, I'll do that next week.
Oh, see, so you already know.
You do actually know.
See.
The Saturn just brings more consciousness into it. You do tend to know, even if it's intuitively, if it's intuitive, Saturn will bring it to the fore.
I see.
You do tend to know. If something's,
see.
it's like in a relationship, you know something's wrong,
Yeah.
but you're thinking, you know what, oh well, we'll fix it next week. And next week, Saturn's saying, no, fix it now before it becomes untenable. And that requires courage.
So it's actually within your range of perception.
It's within your range of perception, but you choose to deal with it or not deal with it.
I see.
It's already there, whether it's a feeling or a thought or you've seen a type of action and you realize, oh no, this needs to stop. Yeah, I'll deal with it next week because I'm going Sambrin 3 times a week. Yeah? So Saturn's task is to ensure that all our lessons are learned and karma is balanced out in this life rather than the next. Saturn doesn't believe in the hereafter. Saturn believes in dealing with it now. Yeah? Saturn definitely doesn't take any prisoners, and each individual will learn their assigned karmic lesson no matter how long it may take. So be warned. Any questions? Okay, let us return. I like to use the analogy of Saturn as being like the brakes in the car, while Mars and Jupiter are like the accelerator. So once again, the analogy of brakes, of limiting, of slowing down, most people seem to get, when I use that analogy, most people seem to understand it. So just think of the way that you use the brakes. If you drive, the brakes in the car, how you use them and why you use them. And you can get a very, very, very vague sense of what Saturn is doing in your life. Saturn is not stopping your life. Saturn is not even limiting your life. Saturn is saying, know when to slow down, know when to stop, and know when to move. If you do the stop, slow down, and move, that's the cycle of Saturn. That's the energetic cycle of Saturn. And with this image in mind, of the brakes in the car, it is through the safety of isolation, and I use the words the safety of isolation, or going on the inward journey, or having a period of confined constriction, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, psychic, spiritual space, that we are able to make the most progress in our life travels. And the reason, as I said before, is that we need time, we need to slow down, because when we rush, we miss the detail. We see the big picture, but we miss the details, and Saturn is about detail. Saturn is very much about going over things more than once, about understanding that detail is necessary to complete the picture. The overall picture is one portion, but we do need the detail to make that picture more interesting. We do need the isolation, and we do need the sense of being alone sometimes, not because we're lonely, but we need time. Being alone gives us time to actually take care of business, to look at ourselves, to see what needs fixing, and to work out a strategy so that we can fix it. Whether that's seeking outside help of counselling or whatever, or actually going inside and becoming our own counsellor. Saturn's twin properties of contraction and crystallization, that's what creates the solidity in the world. Very different to Uranus and Neptune. Uranus is beyond the world. Uranus is the sudden realization from the ether. Neptune is this nebulous, moving, flowing world that those who are in the mind don't quite understand. But Saturn is real. R-E-A-L. I'll say it again, real. Saturn is very, very down to earth. And Saturn is the energy that makes the lasting manifestations of our hopes and dreams. These are created by Jupiter. They are seen and moved on by Uranus and Neptune in these other worlds. But Saturn is the one energy that allows it to become physical, allows it to become manifest. So in other words, I'll give you the example of visualizing being successful. Yeah, with Uranus and with Neptune, yes, you can visualize being successful. But physically being successful is something different. So winning awards and accolades, that is the physical manifestation of success for some people. It could be a business award or a lifetime achievement. That is Saturn physicalizing, making solid, real, tangible your hopes and dreams. And that is one of the reasons why Saturn is probably, to me, one of the most powerful planet in your birth chart. Because without Saturn, nothing can be made real, nothing can be made manifest. And on the earth plane here, people are interested in the real and the manifest and the tangible. The concept of old age and death and the end of the life cycle are also part of the Saturnine energetic cycle. The transformation from one level of reality, which is earthbound and finite and proper and solid and logical and real, changes into something else. it's explicable, but it changes into something inexplicable. So the Uranian sudden understanding of something without having any logical mental processes, and the Neptunian reality, which is even beyond the Uranian, which is so bizarre that your human mind cannot really conceive it because it's metaphysical or beyond this logical comprehension. This is the opposite to the Saturnine structure and energetic cycle concerning life, what's real. The colours black and dark browns and greys are part of the Saturnine energetic expression. So people who tend to wear darker colours, sober, dual, serious colours, may not be Capricorns, but they will have that aspect to their personality. They will try to bring that serious aspect out of their personality. And it's no coincidence that these sober colours are traditionally worn at funerals and at corporate events and in the business world. The metal is lead, which is a very heavy, it's not necessarily a metal, but you know, the metal they call it is lead. That's heavy, that's grey. So there's a lot of heaviness, earthiness, seriousness, soberness, and sobriety associated with Saturn. And energetically, Saturn is our ability to take life experience, to learn from it, and to become a wiser, more mature member of society. And when Saturn energy is prevalent, that could be when Saturn is moving around your astrological chart, your birth chart, in a transit, or you have a Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars in Capricorn, or Saturn is on the ascendant, the first house, or the descendant, the 7th house, or on the 4th house, like the 10th house, or is particularly strong, or is next to conjunct another planet, then we call that Saturn energy being prevalent, there's a lot of it about. And when Saturn is prevalent, we are commanded to work hard. We have to persevere with the tasks, the challenges, the issues, no matter how arduous or difficult they may seem. We have to have patience, we have to take time, we have to have courage, and we have to understand that ultimately we will reach our goal. Even though sometimes you think, this is never ending, why do I have to go for this difficult, tough time? The tough time is a challenge because it's something you need to learn. It's something you need to balance out in this life. Not in the past, not in the hereafter, in the here and now. And it's got to be done on the earth. And it's got to be done in a logical, positive, structured, tangible way. It's not a dream, it's not a thought, it's not an idea. It's something made manifest. It's something that is real. Sobriety and order and commitment are also key aspects of how Saturn operates in your life. And an example of how Saturn operates during the first Saturn return cycle, which is approximately 28 years in a person's birth chart. I will explain that in a minute, but first you have a question, so.
Yeah, when you said that a number of planets conglomerate in one sign and Saturn is passing through that sign,
Yeah.
does that tend to override to a certain degree the influence of those other planets?
No, what Saturn, so I'll give you an example. At the moment, Saturn's in Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
And Scorpio is my second house of personal resources. I'm going to give you my own personal example of what is it I'm experiencing now. Saturn in Scorpio is in my second house, which means my personal money.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn demands that if I owe a debt, I must pay it. I can't just run away and say, well, I'm leaving that behind. No, Saturn is saying all the debts you owe, you have to pay them. You have to work out a plan and pay them.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn will also limit the amount of money I have. Not because Saturn's being cruel, but because Saturn wants me to appreciate money in a more positive way. In other words, it's not just a given, you have to earn it.
Okay.
Right? I'm giving you a transit which is happening now.
Yeah.
If I look at Saturn in Scorpio as it's moving around my birth chart, as it's in Scorpio, it's in my second house, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was born, it was in my 7th house. At the moment, it's in my second house. So that's the part that Saturn wants me to deal with. Saturn wants me to take care of business through my personal resources, through paying things on time, through not having debt, through clearing debt, through appreciating money, through not spending money if I don't have to. Yeah?
I see.
That's what's happened to me at this time, now. For the next 2 years and a half, 2 years really, Saturn will be constantly challenging me with my personal resources. It won't say I can earn money, but that money has to be put to good use. I can't just go and buy some Jimmy Choos. No. What's got to happen now is I've got to go and put money away as a savings, as a nest egg for my old age. That's what Saturn and Scorpio is saying I best do. You better look after your personal resources, honey, because one day you're going to be old. So you need some dough in a little pot, because if you don't have dough, there'll be a problem.
Got it.
So Saturn is saying, why don't you set up a little nest egg now? Yeah, that's my personal one.
Gotcha.
You obviously have Saturn in different signs to me.
Yeah.
You have a different ascendant to me, so
Yeah,
you're in a
sure,
different
sure,
house.
Sure.
Yeah?
Sure.
So that's what Saturn is doing with me. Wherever Saturn is in the birth chart, that's what Saturn wants you to concentrate on.
Ah, I see.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We'll get to that. We will
Yeah,
get to that
yeah.
now in the next few months.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
does that answer your question?
Yeah, half of it, but I'll
All
get
right.
the, yeah.
So, as I was saying, the concept of sobriety,
Mhm,
order and commitment are the key
Mhm.
aspects of how Saturn operates in your life.
mhm,
And an example of how Saturn operates during the first Saturn return cycle, approximately 28 years, in a person's birth chart, is as follows. At the age of 7, you get your first Saturn aspect as a conscious being. When you're small before 7, you are conscious, but not really. You kind of are still in your own little world.
mhm.
And it's only, as I said, when you start going to school, getting out into the world, into the external world, that you begin to understand that there is more than you, more than your mum and dad and your sisters. You know about auntie and uncle and whatever, but really you're used to your mum, usually a mum and dad and some sisters and some brothers, usually.
Mhm, mhm.
Maybe a few uncle, auntie, but not really, the ones you see every day.
Mhm, mhm.
The first Saturn quarter is when the sun, your ego, squares responsibility or authority, right? So
Mhm.
this is what I'm saying about exerting this will.
Mhm,
Because now you become a more conscious being,
mhm.
you are starting to say, no, I know this and I want this and I want that. And people are saying, well, you can't have that. It's impossible because you have to wait. And small children don't wait, as you well know. So Saturn also teaches patience.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, that you're not gonna. My mother used to be a social worker, and she used to call it deferred gratification, not instant. Child, it is deferred gratification. Save up and buy that thing. Don't just go and put it on my max out my card. No, save it up so that you don't create debt.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Saturn is not about credit card. It's the opposite. You should be putting pennies in to save. No. Credit card is Jupiter. Oh yes. Put it on the thing. I charge my MIDI anyway. Charge my card anyway. That's Jupiter.
Mhm.
Saturn is saying, but didn't you learn that when you charge that card and you can't pay it, you get into problems? I'm saying to you, if you save up for the thing and buy it, you won't have any problem and you'll appreciate it more because you had to save for it.
Mhm,
That's the difference between Saturn and Jupiter.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
So for me, when I was 6 and a bit, I got my first, almost 7, I got my first ego clash with authority. So that Saturn was in Gemini, but then it overlapped into Cancer because my Saturn's in Pisces. So when it was in Gemini, I was trying to exert my will at school, but because they were grown-ups and they were authoritarian and they had more life experience, they were more mature and wise than me, I came up against a brick wall. Yeah?
Mhm.
So, what happens at the age of 7? We call it the first Saturn quarter. At the age of 7, a child begins to formally learn that structured discipline, order, and manners are an important part of the maturation process. It's a time when the child goes from play, 0 to 7 years old, to the seriousness of learning to read and write fluently with a pen and paper, but most likely on a computer now. 7-year-olds are taught to concentrate, to control bowel movements properly, and how to relate to adults and peer group by measuring the consequences of their action and how those actions may elicit positive or negative response in others. That happens when the Sun is making a difficult aspect with your Saturn. That happens when you're 6 and a bit into 7 and a bit, right? That's the first time you get a slam from Saturn. we call it the first Saturn quarter, okay? That happens around 7. That's why the Jesuits said, give me a boy and you know, and by 7 I'll make him a man for 7 years, yeah? That's the principle they're working on. When you're age 14, we call it the first half Saturn return. So for me, that would have been when Saturn was opposite my Saturn. So my Saturn's in Pisces, and the opposite of Pisces is in Virgo. So when Saturn was in Virgo, I would be 14. This is traditionally the time in Western Europe, at least, when the teenage year starts. And that's the time when young people have to choose for the GCSEs. And the choices made around that time will have an impact on their lives until they reach the age of approximately 28, or the start of the first Saturn return. So when you're 14, you're a teenager. You know, people are not treating like a small child anymore, but you're not a grown-up. And that's where the tension and the stress comes in. Because you're emotionally you're not very grown up, but in your mind you start to challenge people's ideas of your peer group, of your parents, of the teachers. That's when we call it teenage rebellion. It's a natural thing to do, because you need to challenge what's already gone so that you can make your own way, so you can mature, you can learn, and you can become mature and more wise. So when you're 14 and you choose those GCSEs, people don't even know that they're actually choosing something that's going to impact them for another 14 years. But they don't know that. And it's interesting how school encourages you to choose your GCSEs and your options at that age. You're not a baby, you're not a little 7-year-old, but then you're not a grown-up either. But then you can make some decisions for yourself. So basically we're giving you more opportunity to make a few decisions for yourself. Now some people will argue that 14 is too young, but it's, you know, it's different. Things are different, you know what I mean? It's different, but in the main, that's the time when you make those decisions. And those decisions will impact on you for another 14 years, whether you realize it or not. Alright, so that's the first half Saturn return. That's when you're 14 years old. Then when you're 21, we come to what we call the third quarter. So for me, Saturn was in Sagittarius, which was another sign which kind of jarred against the things that I really wanted to do. And funny enough, that was my best year ever, because that was when I sung for Nelson Mandela, and I was with all these famous people. That was actually my major year. 21 used to be the age of majority in the UK. This was the legal age when an individual was considered to be an adult or legally responsible for their actions. Before that age, you had to have your parent or your parents or your legal guardian's permission to inherit money, property, or get married. The age of consent was lowered to 18 in 1970 as a political strategy by the Labour Party, because they wanted to capture the vote of the new younger voters. And that's how they won that May the 29th, 1970 election, because they had lowered the age. Energetically, with Saturn's influence during the age of 21, this 7-year cycle is a time to start thinking about a career plan as young people leave higher education, university, to start making their way in the world. Perceptibly, Saturn is demanding that the carefree time of semi-dependence on the parents and the state are left behind, so that individuals can begin to structure their own career/life path in the wider world. When new important relationships, whether personal or professional, gain greater emphasis. So 21 is actually a fulcrum time. It's actually a key time. It's actually setting you up for the next 7 years, which is going to be the beginning of the Saturn return. So that's why you have university between 18 and 21. Does that make sense? So can you see how socially now, how Saturn actually plays a really, really important part in a person's maturation process, in Western Europe at least?
Well, seeing, strange enough, you mentioning that about 21 has reminded me about two people who are 21, or were 21 last year, and what you're saying is describing.
But can you see?
Yes.
That's part, because this is simply a maturation process. This is a circle, a cycle of maturation. So it's a cycle of becoming from unwise or non-wise to becoming wiser. Not to becoming wise, to becoming wiser, or to having much more life experience. Because that's how we become wise, according to Saturn. And then at age 28, we call it the last quarter of the 8-year cycle, or the Saturn return. So this, from 21 to 28, you're being teed up and set up for what's going to happen in your Saturn return. So for me, my Saturn came back to the place in Pisces where it was when I was born. And this time is commonly known in astrology as the Saturn return. For the first time that Saturn has returned to the position it occupied when you were born. This complete cycle is the first time that one's maturity or lack of it is called into question on an external basis. And by that I mean that the world really starts to judge you and give you some social, perhaps political status. Suddenly you've arrived and you think and you feel differently, as if you are grown up, in speech marks. It's a time to move from a junior to a senior position in a corporation, to get married, start a family, commit to a mortgage, or anything long term. And just generally work hard to reach the top of the ladder, as befits Capricorn energy. And Saturn obviously rules Capricorn. So the first Saturn return may also feel like you've had your freedom curtailed. Suddenly you're having to make sacrifices. You're experiencing delays. There's a kind of sense of isolation. Suddenly you're not part of that group at uni or at college anymore. Suddenly you're having to stand up and be counted. Other people outside are actually judging you now, and it's mostly employers, or if you're engaged, the prospective in-laws, or they're saying, oh, what a nice boy, a nice girl, you can get married, and you're thinking, I don't really want to do that, but oh, when are you getting married? This kind of thing starts to sing around that age. Yeah? If you look at Prince William and the girl Kate Middleton, or Duchess of Cambridge, they are a textbook case of Saturn return. They got married in the Saturn return. They're the same age, so they got married in the Saturn return. She's now having a baby. She is 31, which is coming out of the Saturn return. So the baby has come at the end of her Saturn return, and it will be born just as she's coming out of the Saturn return. Like I said, having a baby, a family, that's normal. Yeah? But there's also a sense of isolation. Suddenly, I can't fall back on mummy and daddy. Oh, now I've got to make these major life decisions myself. Oh, okay. So what have I learned between 21 and 28 that's going to help me to make the right decisions for me and not only for me, but for those who are in my circle, in my family, those who are my friends, with whom I'm in a relationship. These are the questions that Saturn gets you to ask when you're about 28. And there's a tendency, you start to become very serious as well. And some people, for no other reason than nothing, just start to feel depressed or down, or their life can be flying, they've got the career they want, they've got the big bad house, they're married, they've got the ring, the baby, but something just keeps saying, I don't feel right, I don't know why, I don't know if this sacrifice is worth it. And that can sort of creep in for no apparent reason, but there is an apparent reason. Saturn, as I said, is getting you to concentrate on what is real for you. What works, what you need to help you to become a more mature, wiser person. Sometimes as well you get these vague irrational fears. It's just suddenly out of the blue, you could be sleep. Some people get insomnia around this time as well. They can't sleep, they start to get anxious, but they don't know why. And it's just Saturn's way of helping you to feel the fear and do it anyway, to paraphrase that ubiquitous book. You know what I mean? Because Saturn is about fear. It's about facing the fear through limitation, facing them. And these fears are not fears that you're necessarily conscious of. The fears may seem irrational. They are not irrational, but it's only that you're not conscious or aware of them. So they feel irrational. Where did that come from? I suddenly feel out the blue. No, I don't want to be in this anymore. It's not that. You need to just start looking at why these irrational fears have come so that you can deal with them. Any questions? Right, I'm going to open this up now. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read 3 quotes. I've got a word. I'll read 3 quotes, and then we're going to talk about what our concept or notion of that word and these quotes are. So I'm going to start with responsibility. A man, sooner or later, discovers that he is the master gardener of his soul, the director of his life. That's by a writer called James Allen. The willingness to accept responsibility for one's own life is the source from which Self-Respect Springs. That's by Joan Didion. She's also a very famous American authoress who deals with the concepts of chaos and societal chaos and social fragmentation. And then we need to restore the full meaning of that old word duty. It is the other side of rights. That's by Pearl Buck. Pearl Buck was a very famous novelist again. She was American, but she went to live in China. She in the 30s. She won the Pulitzer Prize. She won the Nobel Peace Prize. And her stuff was a lot. She got very much into social. She kind of demystified China for the Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And she got into this whole concept of Asian people and how they were, her parents were missionaries, and how missionaries used to go to China and were quite arrogant in that they expected people to be like them. They didn't understand the Chinese culture.
Mm-hmm.
So she demystified China for the Americans and demystified the Americans for the Chinese. Very interesting lady.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can Google her, Pearl Buck. She died I think in the 50s or 60s. She's very famous. Pearl Buck is a very famous. She's written some wonderful books on marginalized people. Yeah.
Mm.
So I've read these 3 quotes, but I'd like to know your ideas of what responsibility means to you.
All right. Okay. The example that comes to mind is, okay, I'm self-employed.
Okay.
And I've worked for companies, I've had jobs and the rest of it, but I've been self-employed for quite a while now. And by taking that responsibility of looking after my own bills and my own everything, I don't have a regular monthly paycheck, I'm free.
Okay.
And that's the deal. I accept the responsibility of being self-employed so that I am free. I want to take a holiday, all I have to do, I don't have to ask anybody, I just go. So long as there's money in the account, yeah? That's how I live my responsibility, yeah?
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if I have a clear answer straight away.
Don't worry, well, we'll come back to it. If you don't have one, that's fine.
Now, responsibility for me means becoming more aware of the duties that I have towards the welfare of others, especially in different contexts, because to one degree or another I've always had an awareness of some kind of duty towards the welfare of others to help others move forward.
Okay.
However, as time has gone on, that's become more refined, so that some people I might feel that yes, I'd like to help them and contribute towards helping them move forward, but in certain instances they're not interested in that. They don't want to accept that, and responsibility is learning that I have to refine that duty and say to myself, well, okay, I've got a strong sense of duty towards helping the world or contributing towards the welfare of others to one degree or another. That's an innate thing for me. However, with certain people, I have to learn that not everyone is interested in that or interested in receiving any kind of help from me in that respect.
Okay.
I have to allow them to get on with it. And also from an individual point of view, I've had to learn to look at my own shortcomings and to be responsible for managing those shortcomings so they don't upset and undermine others.
Okay, that's good. What does responsibility mean to you?
The ability to respond. So if you've done the inner work, the work that Saturn demands of you, you have more of that ability to respond appropriately or effectively, and know when you can't.
Yes, that's good. That's very good. That's good.
Honestly,
honestly don't know. I'm just been thinking, even looking at the word that I've gotten written down here, like, I don't really feel like it's something I understand completely.
Well, none of us understand completely.
Yeah, I
That's
feel
why
quite,
Saturn's here.
yes, and I feel quite a lot of resistance to the world, I guess. And I think maybe this year I'm starting to learn a little bit about what it is. I don't know, I don't know if it's anything I've ever really
Considered
been
or
aware
thought
of. Yeah, exactly, considered or been aware of. So, yeah.
Or do you work?
Yes, yeah, I do.
Right, so do you work with lots of people or?
No, I'm self-employed, but yeah, I teach yoga. So.
Right, so you have a responsibility already, don't you?
Yes, yeah, I guess I do.
So
I just
if you're teaching yoga, automatically, that's the first thing I hear, teach yoga. The teach tells me, Saturn is a teacher, mentor. The teach tells me that you as a yoga teacher have a responsibility to, for argument's sake, ensure that you turn up on time for the lesson.
yeah.
Ensure that the place where they are is comfortable and safe, that everybody is comfortable and safe.
Yeah.
Ensure that the people pay you. Ensure that the instruction that you give them is correct. Whatever yoga
Yeah, so
you,
the physical
yeah.
aspects of it. Okay.
so you have that's a response, but you also have a duty of care, because these people are coming to you
yeah.
to learn something. So you have a duty of care towards them. That's responsibility. That's also obligation. The obligation is these people are coming to you to learn. So you are using your Saturn energy as a teacher, as
Yeah.
a mentor. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
It does, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you can consider that actually what I am doing is quite responsible.
So it's a matter of perception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah, I have them now.
Okay.
The main three things are responsibility, how I'm nurturing, congruent, nurturing to people I love,
Okay.
and actually maybe humanity in general, congruent to my own character, to be trying what I express to others and who I am, is congruent to what I really feel I am. And then karma, what I do, how it's going to affect in the future.
Because karma is now, isn't it? We make the karma now, karma and dharma. We will get back into that in a minute, but I'm just ensuring that 3 of the main key words that you guys have a perception or understanding, your own personal one, are 3 key words that are key and important in dealing with Saturn. The second word is perseverance. Okay? This is from Maya Angelou, who is obviously a famous another famous American writer. I don't know why, I just like the quotes, that's why I chose them. I didn't choose them because they were writers, I just like the quotes. You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. In fact, it may be necessary to encounter the defeats so that you can know who you are, what you can rise from, and how you can still come out of it. Confucius, or Confucius to most people. It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just because you fail
Yeah.
once doesn't mean you're going to fail at everything. That's Madame Marilyn Monroe. So I'm going to start with you. What do you understand by the notion, the idea of perseverance? What does it mean to you personally?
I guess to persevere for me requires a certain amount of self-belief, to kind
Okay.
of believe in oneself, to have enough kind of, wherewithal, strength, and to believe in that strength, to just carry on even when it gets super, super hard and you just want to give up. Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I'll go along with Ellie and Confucius.
Okay.
Yeah, similar,
To quote the I Ching, perseverance furthest, in that when a situation appears to restrict and hinder one, that is when you have to call on your inner resources to continue, even though it might appear that things are working against you. And so you have to say, right, let's have a look at this whole thing. You step back and look at the whole situation, think, okay, let's go. You keep going, even though it appears that things are falling on your head. and people are taking metaphorical baseball bats to you. You have to. Perseverance is also based on an understanding of the situation you are in, so you can keep going. Because if you don't have the understanding of the situation, you cannot persevere. One has to follow the other.
Okay, that's good.
Just keeping going through the day,
Okay.
day after day.
Yeah.
Just that, just day after day, the
Routine.
You know, you just do it.
Yeah.
That's it. You just do it, and then, you know, if you're nice to yourself, you give yourself a holiday.
I see a theme here.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
For me, perseverance is understanding what pain really is.
Yeah, I can go with that one. Yeah, I can go with that one. Yeah, I can go with that one. And the last word is obligation. So I'll read the quotes. Relationships based on obligation lack dignity. That's by Wayne Dyer, who is what do you call this? Like a spiritual writer.
Mm-hmm.
Your only obligation in any lifetime is to be true to yourself. Being true to anyone else or anything else is impossible. That's by Richard Bach.
Mm.
I believe that a worthwhile life is defined by a kind of spiritual journey and a sense of obligation. Hillary Rodham Clinton. So what does obligation mean?
That is the duty of care that automatically occurs towards somebody in a situation where you have perhaps a responsibility towards people in that situation automatically. Because when you go about your daily business, you carry within yourself a certain set of parameters that dictate how you behave towards others.
Okay.
And so what I call common courtesy obliges you to extend that common courtesy to others as a matter of honour and so forth. So you say, well, if you standing at a bus stop, the bus turns up, one feels obliged to allow others who may have come before you to go on the bus first rather than just sort of steam in front of them. And also as well, in the course of your dealings with others, there is an innate obligation, an intuitive obligation to act towards them with basic courtesy.
See, that comes back to, obviously you've learned the Saturn lesson. Remember I said to you, between 0 and 7, you have no concept of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that is learned.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be civilized.
Yeah.
You are, they used to call them savages. And
Yeah.
once you were 7, 8, 9, 10, we teach you
Mm-hmm.
to adhere to rules and regulations
Mm-hmm.
which are, shall we say, helpful to those who want to be civilized, mature, wise society members.
Mhm.
So what you're actually saying, the reason why I've used these 3 words is because I'm getting you all to discuss and to debate your concept of Saturn. That's all it is.
Mhm.
Because these are 3 key words
Mm-hmm.
that describe Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand relationships based on obligation, lack dignity.
I think this is my understanding of it. I think Wayne Dyer is saying, if you're just obliged to somebody because it's a knee-jerk reaction, it's not real.
Okay.
If you're obliged to somebody because you're connected to them, because there is a genuine, genuine interaction between you, then that's dignified.
Yeah.
But just to be obliged to somebody just because, whether it's a demon or a thief or whatever, he's saying lacks dignity because it's not real. You're just doing it because.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? You're just doing it because, I suppose that's the form.
Okay.
So what it is you're not actually interacting with that person as a person. It's, oh well, it's a human, so I suppose I have to, which isn't real, is it?
No.
That's my understanding of what he's writing. Somebody else would have a different understanding, but that's how I understand it.
Yeah, the way I see that one is, oh, it's Christmas. I've got to go to that, see that one. Oh, it's
That's not real.
Passover. I've got to go and do that.
It's not real.
Oh, I don't really want to, but they're family, I suppose.
Do you see what I mean? So that's the flip side of obligation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess everything that you guys have just said is what comes to mind when I think about obligation. How one should behave, really, I guess, to be a functioning part of society. You know. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions about that?
Can I say mine?
Yeah, you can do. Sorry, Terry.
That's alright.
Sorry, because you went very quiet. That's why. Sorry.
The only way for me to have the solution of obligation, because it could be such a huge, overwhelming thing that can zap all energy, is to understand how I'm obligated to myself,
Excellent.
and then to go and do it
Excellent.
from there.
Yeah, because that's what Saturn is saying. When you go inward, you have to understand that you are working on the inner part of you because you are obliged to take care of you. This one that I said, your only obligation in any lifetime is to be true to yourself. Being true to anyone else or anything else is impossible. That I chose that one just to show that actually, really we are obliged to ourselves first. Because if we're not obliged to ourselves first, how are we going to be obliged to anybody else?
Can I give my
Of course,
comment as well? Thank you.
certainly.
Yeah, that's really because for me it was obligations to family, obligations to this, obligations
what I mean?
to everybody, and I had to realise, oh, what do I want? What about my obligations to myself? And that was a big step for me.
Does that make sense?
That was a very big step for me.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Because remember, ultimately, Saturn isn't interested about the external. I told you, Saturn is not really interested in external. I want you to go inward. I want you to stop running around and sunburn 3 times a week and come home and clean out that cupboard and get rid of that stuff and put it to the charity store like I said you would. Why do you keep delaying it? Because it's still there. Every time you go sunburn, you open the cupboard, you see the stuff. When are you going to clear it out? Yeah? So that's the key to discussing perseverance, responsibility and obligation, and how important, when they are expressed positively, how important they are to us in life, how they help the wheels of life to be oiled.
Yeah.
Because remember, ultimately, we're trying to be part of this civilized society. We're trying to be mature, more wiser members who are useful to society, right? So the way for us to do it is to adhere to some of these things. You don't have to go overboard and go mad and become totally, obviously, obsessive, because there's no need. But you do need to understand that everything, people say, I can do what I like. I'm thinking,
Oh yeah, really?
My mother used to, as your mother used to say, my mother said, try the world. Do you see what I mean?
Mum used to say
Try the world, which means, you really think you can do that? Maybe you can do it here, but honey, the world is not going to be so forgiving.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And that's why we have a mother and a father. They are our Saturn. They work out our Saturn for us until we are able to do it ourselves. And that usually we start to do it ourselves really around the teenage, around the half Saturn, first half Saturn.
Well, that's why we get into conflict with
That's-
parents around that time.
Do you see? Because they have always been our yardstick, our lodestar. Whatever they said went.
Yeah. Yeah.
But suddenly we're thinking, no, I can think for myself. That doesn't apply to me. That applies to you and your generation. And that's what they call the generation gap.
Yeah.
That's what they mean by generation gap. Because your parents' Saturn tends to usually be square to yours. What's my mum's is? My mum's isn't. Mine's half square. But mothers and children, it means, when I say square in astrological terms, I mean it's uneasy. The two energies are uneasy. Karmically, they're here for 2 different purposes. Yeah? We'll get onto that when I come to Saturn by sign and Saturn by house. But the main question I've got is, how can we reconcile Saturnine energy in our astrological chart so that we can become more integrated, mature characters? For this piece, I'd like everybody, I'm going to use the back of this because I've packed my paper away now, to give me a date of birth. Not because I'm sinister, but because that's how it is.
We like you all very sinister.
Yeah.
So.
I know things. But just write it down for me, because what I'm going to do now is make it more come on. make it more personal for you.
Thank you.
What I'm going to do first, that question, how can we reconcile the Saturnine energy in our birth charts so that we can become more integrated, mature people? I'm going to do astrology now. What I'm going to do now is just give a brief description. There's 3 of you in here that have the Saturn in Virgo. No. 1, 2, 3. So you guys should listen to this one, right? Saturn's in Virgo. So what was I saying about Saturn again? What does Saturn represent?
Responsibility.
What else?
Get
Restriction
Yep.
and
Order.
Yep.
order,
Structure.
Yep.
teaching.
Yep.
Get real.
Yep.
Obligation, did we say that?
Okay. Yep. And mentoring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So the Saturn in Virgo chapesses, you're karmically, although you're born different years, you still have the same karmic responsibility, obligation. Right? Because obviously there are 12 signs, so Saturn goes through the 12 signs. When it gets to Virgo, the most important thing about Virgo is service and detail and discrimination. And being extremely detailed. Part of your problem is, sorry you guys, I don't mean to be rude, but you can get anal about the detail. I'm not being rude, I'm just telling you how it is.
So
And
true.
it can, if you're not careful, you can get bowel problems from that, because you hold all this stuff in. And you are worrywarts. You try to make it smooth facade, but you are worrywarts. But you are really, really good. Saturn and Virgo people are amazing structuralists. They're amazing at working long, arduous hours without no problem. They don't argue. In fact, they revel and they find their sense of self in work. That's one of your karmic lessons, is to find your sense of self through work. Work is the rent you pay for life. Work is the way that you, Saturn and Virgo people, come into your own and express yourself. Also, you can be, strange enough, although you're servers, you can be quite self-serving when you need to be, because that's the way it is. And being self-serving is okay to a point, but it mustn't go to an
Oh dear.
extreme point.
Oh dear.
And also with Saturn and Virgo people, also with Saturn and Virgo people, Saturn and Virgo people in relationships are a little bit constipated emotionally. It's just how it is. And you guys need to let go and swing from the chandelier, man. In your in your Givenchy shoes and your funky lingerie, because nobody can be that uptight all the time. It's not good
I'm not
for
saying a word.
It's not good for the bowel. It's not good for the tummy.
The prosecution is leading the witness.
And it's really not good for anything else. So yes, it's wonderful to have the detail. Without you, Saturn and Virgo guys, this world would not be oiled so smoothly. And it is wonderful that, and there's the fear that you have. I'll find out where the house, the house is in there. But just by sign, you come to get into your sense of self through work, through service, through health, through diet, yoga. You see what I mean? You've come. That's what you've come to give the world. That's your gift to the world, to bring order and structure to people's lives whose health is a bit wobbly, who are not so organized with the work, who need that down-to-earth, solid concept of stable, I am here, everything is fine. The other side of it is you have to take care of your own health before you can take care of others. You must nurture yourself and make sure that your tummy is always fed at the right time, because the little tummy can't take it. And you must try not to be so afeared. Your irrational fears are to do with work, to do with health, to do with the way that people see you and perceive you. So, Saturn in Virgo, we love you. We really do. We love you, Saturn in Virgo. We really do. We love you, Virgos. We really do, Saturn. So that's just the kind of, because there's 3 of you, that's
You get a
your
song.
one.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Saturn in Cancer, as I said earlier, there is an issue with father, with fathering, and with the fathering energy in the system. And it's very specific with Saturn in Cancer, because Saturn rules home, mother, domesticity, nurturing, feeling safe. Saturn in Cancer always never ever feels truly safe in a relationship. and they're always trying so hard to make it work, when actually it's not usually them. They usually attract to them quite authoritarian people who are quite authoritarian, who try to possess them, who try to father them. And the reason why they attract those people is Saturn is trying to say to them, what you need to do is you need to father yourself. You need to dig deep, go inward, do the journey, and find the father in yourself, so that you are dependent on yourself and not others to give you the father energy. And they sometimes don't understand about that they are a modicum of authority. They try to stand back because they don't want to make any noise and don't want to make any problem, and they don't want to have any rows. They disempower themselves by giving their energy over to the father figure, who then becomes a bogeyman or bogeywoman and causes them to bust loose. So in the end, they have to reject that person who is their father, mother figure, because actually they've got to go on the inward journey and do it themselves. And they will try to distract themselves by choosing somebody who organizes their life, but that's not the way it's going to be. Yeah?
You nailed it.
And then Saturn in Capricorn, Saturn is in its own sign. So actually Saturn is comfortable in Capricorn. But Saturn in Capricorn people, their thing is, they're ambitious in the traditional sense of climbing the ladder, but they are also full of fear. Every time they do something, they think, am I going to be able to do this? They're perfectly competent, but there is a niggling fear which says this has to be done a certain way. And there is a thing about relinquishing control, and it can be quite frightening for them, because I think if I relinquish control, then I will be consumed. I'll be overwhelmed by this one or this situation or that person. So there is a very real fear in Saturn in Capricorn, but because Saturn is in its own sign, it is very comfortable there. A Saturn in Capricorn is actually is a proper teacher mentor. Saturn in Capricorn people should teach or mentor people, because they've got the pure Saturn energy in its own sign, and it should be like on a global or a corporate level, not necessarily a big business, but like a lot of people, because Saturn in Capricorn, when you get to that towards the end of the zodiac cycle, Saturn in Capricorn has a lot of wisdom to give out. And when we become mature, wiser people, the most wonderful thing we can do is to send and give that energy out to others. That wisdom that we have learned and experienced has made us more mature and wise. We actually need to mentor people. It's good for our sanity. It's actually good for your soul. It's good for your progression as a person to mentor and teach, knowing that all that experience and wisdom you have is actually being passed on to the next generation. That is why Saturn in Capricorn's proper job. I've got Saturn in Pisces. I'm the kookiest one out of all of you, because I have the Saturn is the karmic sign planet, and I've got it in the karmic sign. I've got it in the last sign. And when you get to Pisces, that means you've rocked and rolled with everybody. You know all the other 11. Then you get to this 12th one, which you don't know very well yet. Saturn in Pisces, I desperately need to be on my own, because I take in everything from the world. I just suck up every feeling, thought there is in the world, and I've had to learn to give myself filters. I have filters, so all these experiences from all the people in all the world, they're filtered through. If I didn't do that, I just wouldn't be able to function. My business is to heal. It doesn't matter how I do it, but my business is to heal, is to mentor through healing. So I don't have a choice I have to do some kind of healing. Not necessarily counseling, but some kind of spiritual healing. Without that, without doing the spiritual healing, I actually don't have an MO. I don't have a raison d'etre. So for me, I am highly compassionate. I'm into the universe. I'm not even into people. My one problem can be that people will find me too far away, too detached, not connected enough to the human. So that's something I have to watch. I have to make sure that I'm open to what's going on with humanity, with normal human beings, not just live in the spiritual world, but I have to live here. That's why I do things like talks, I do workshops, because it keeps me grounded. You see what I mean? So that's my main thing. The thing with me is the irrational fear of me could be, because I'm aware of it, I don't allow it to overcome me. The irrational fear in me can be relationships because it's in my 7th house. And that relationships will consume me, will overwhelm me, so that I am no longer me. But the whole argument of Saturn and Pisces is that everybody's the same anyway. So there isn't any duality, there's only unity. But because I'm aware of it, I don't operate in that mode. I'm aware of that, what could be. So it's interesting because we've got 3 Saturn in Virgos, and Saturn, Virgo is opposing Pisces. So the people who are Saturn in Virgo are looking to me for spiritual stuff, and I'm looking to the Virgo people for keeping me down to earth and tangible. So you see how it works?
Yeah.
Can you see how it works? It's nice. It's actually quite a nice, I always say oppositions are a really nice thing to have.
Capricorn, Cancer.
Yeah, you see what I mean? Can you see?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Can you see how this goes?
Yeah.
Can you make it up? So can you see where there's opposing thing going on here, and each person is balancing, we're all balancing each other out.
It's all earth and water.
Do you see?
Amazing.
Which is nourishing, because water nourishes earth. Do you see? There's no fire, no air. Water nourishes earth. Now, what I want to know, does anyone know when they were born, what time?
Yes.
Because the reason why I'm doing this is I want to find out where your irrational fears are in your chart, so that you can become aware of them, so that they don't overwhelm you. Yeah. So we don't get the shaking advance. Right. We start with this the first we did, right? Saturn, where Saturn is in your birth chart, in that round wheel, that tells me where your fears are, where your deepest irrational fears are. They're not real, but they are created by your mind, and you are not aware of them. This little exercise is to get you to be aware of the part of you that Saturn is asking you always, from birth until death, to look at. You're always going to be challenged in this part, yeah? So it's the 7th house. I've got the same 7th house as a different sign. But it's relationships, so like I just said, we feel they will threaten. It's an irrational fear, but we feel that relationships will overwhelm us. They will consume us. We will be lost in the other person. So what the Saturn and 7th house people is, they stay away. They go and do the Samba in 3 days a week instead of looking in the cupboard and clearing